Nigel, good to see you. Thank you very much for sparing me some time.
Pleasure, Tony. Pleasure. Good to
We've
see you too.
we've got a list,
We've got
and
a list. You're right. Yeah.
I have a list. So the first item is governance reform. Any movement on that?
We've got some papers with the law officers and waiting for things to come back. The group have met, and I'm told that things will be presented to the states in the autumn for taking forward for reform. As of now, the PNF haven't actually discussed anything, but the Good Governance Group have met and they are working on it.
Okay, so the law officers essentially come back with comments in terms of carrying out, presumably enabling the legislation to make it all work.
Yeah, I'm making sure it's all sensible and fits. I mean, we've got to make it work with Guernsey as well. We're not just, we have to work closely with Guernsey, so we can't do complete isolation here. So there's an awful lot of work behind any change you make to anything in terms of structure and process. And it takes a long time to get it right. And of course, the law officers at the moment are very heavily involved with Moneyval, so their time is incredibly valuable. But it's very important to the islands that we get through the Moneyval review with the best possible light at that time, and that's important to all of us. So I think that must be their priority, and we recognise that.
Okay. Where are you in terms of the appointment for the chief executive officer?
Well, we've just placed the advert today.
Right.
Hot off the press, but the advert's today. And that process, we would hope, if the timetable is stuck to, by the end of September, to have somebody that we could appoint, and obviously then we'll have to work out what notice period they have to work, and et cetera, et cetera. But
how do you get around the problems? How do you get around the problems we've had in the past? In terms of only one CEO ever actually making the 5-year contract, and that was because he was waiting for his pension.
That is a very big issue, Tony. I mean, certainly something we've been working on. We've looked at the process of recruitment and how that's going to go. We've employed a consultant that Jersey used to look at all their recruitment of civil servants, and they used that same consultant, Simon Nash, when Guernsey recruited Mark de Gary. So that worked well from there. So we've employed that process of really changing the way we're doing it, and then reviewing the job description in particular to make sure that it is relevant to what we really want, not what we aspire to have. So making sure it's really relevant, really topical, and I think really important that we try and get a chief exec that's going to help the members take the island forward.
Yeah, because it's a team job, isn't it?
It's a team job, and that's one of the things I think I've noticed since I've been in the role, is working closely with the president and with the civil service under Liz Morris, who's done a fantastic job in temporary role, absolutely outstanding. Working together as a team so that all the parts of the government are working together has been really good, really healthy, and working really well.
Okay. Last time we spoke, we were talking about international public accounting standards. I don't know whether you saw it, but I did an interview a few weeks ago with John Young, who was a senior politician in Jersey, and that he said they adopted it quite a while ago, where Guernsey apparently dragging their feet a bit on it. Can you do it without them?
No, not really.
No.
Because our treasury function is actually managed by Guernsey.
Yeah.
What we want to do is piggyback off what Guernsey are doing to make sure that we learn from their mistakes, if you like, but also make sure that we don't duplicate or reinvent the wheel. We have got some basic work to do. It's a 4-year project, at least, to get to proper international accounting standards. We got some good compliments from people about the clarity in the accounts this year, and we intend to improve every year as we get forward. But you can't do it overnight. There's a number of steps you have to get to actually produce international accounts.
Yeah.
To the standard that everyone would understand. I mean, but we are making progress. But I was very pleased with the positive feedback we had to the accounts and the clarity that was in the accounts this year.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going in the right direction, but it's not just about sort of saying, oh, we'll adopt this. It's all about having to carry out valuations on assets and liabilities and everything, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons it's a slow, long process. Getting the asset register right and getting valuations on them is all part of the process.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean, everybody who knows and sees the accounts hasn't seen a balance sheet. I mean, there isn't a balance sheet that is published. And of course, international accounting standards will require a balance sheet. So to do that, you have to put your assets and liabilities on the balance sheet.
But I guess, you know, they've got the right person in you. I mean, you do know a bit about these things.
Just a little bit, yeah. It's been fun and games, but no, it's a challenge, and it's not something we take lightly. We
Be a good
want to
bit of
produce
legacy
safe
for
information.
be a good bit of legacy for you to leave behind if you can get it through.
Well, certainly you'll be on. If I don't get re-elected, say in 4 years' time, whatever it is, if I didn't, then and it hasn't been done, I'd like to think we're well on the
Yeah.
way to being
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. Poor house sales in quarter 2. I added up the totals. It came out to about 2 million in terms of totals, which produces about 100,000 in revenue via Conji. Housing market slowing down, so presumably you can't necessarily look at the past and say, oh, we're hopefully pulling some money on that direction, when, you know, it's quite clear that due to mortgage interest rates and a whole load of other things, house sales are going to slow down.
Well, they have slowed down. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's always the island rumour that if the Labour government gets in, we'll see more people coming here to buy the houses. I mean, that's something I've heard for many years. We'll see whether that's the case or not.
I've never seen it
Um,
actually happen in the past.
well, I say I've only ever been told it by lots of people.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but the reality of where we stand is, as I said in the states meeting, is we're looking at budgeting budget for house sales and the duty we get from that. And you know we'll budget accordingly. I mean, it's probably when you look at the numbers in terms of property tax, just to give you sort of a clue, the states have traditionally given grants of 150,000 ish every year.
yeah,
That's 7 to 8% of the property tax we take.
yeah,
So, you know, we're dealing with some really difficult numbers to get the books to balance, and to just, you have to put it into those sort of contexts for people to really understand that we haven't got there's not a money tree out there, and we have got to actually make ends meet, and we've got to balance the books.
yeah,
But it's, you know, people we are actually saying to people, there won't be the grants for next year. We just
yeah.
can't afford it.
No, quite. No. And you know, I mean, we're in the same boat as virtually every other government in the world, probably from that point of view, in terms of, you know, trying to make the books balance. So that naturally leads me on to the Guernsey review of capital projects, which is going to take place in September. What have they got there? They've got education, they've got health, you know, a whole load of really essential items. Where does the Alderney Airport extension fit into that one?
Well, the Alderney Airport extension is seen as an essential work. In fact, I've had meetings this morning on that particular matter, but it's seen as essential works. And currently, the Guernsey civil servants that are implementing it have been told to get full steam ahead. They're working on it. The tenders are out. The tenders are due back in September. And hopefully, this is seen as such an essential work. And the feedback from the civil servants is positive. So we just got to believe that that's right, and the work's carrying on. The airport will not survive another. You know, this winter is going to be a tough one for us because the airport runway is crumbling. Let's not kid ourselves. It won't last more than this winter, so we need to do something.
Yeah.
And we've got to get on with it. But we had meetings this morning. We're pushing ahead as fast as we can to make sure that we hit the time scales that everybody's set for work to begin next year.
Is it this review will go before the States of Guernsey?
Yeah.
So will they vote on it?
Well, at the moment, there's all sorts of discussions going on, and I think Mark Haley was quoted in the Journal this week, I think, saying the GST will come back and see whether, and so on. I mean, GST will come at some point. You know, when we talk about the money and balancing the books and everything else, we haven't got many other options in terms of both Guernsey and Alderney. So GST will come back in some form or another.
Well, working with
I don't know how they're going to do the debate in Guernsey, and I think that's one of the things they got. You mentioned education and care. I mean, they're the pillars of the island plan that we're trying to push forward. We've just announced the integration of the care product on an Alderney, which is fantastic step forward. The care workers all getting behind it. You know, the Connaught, the IMC, the hospital, all working together in a more collegiate way, it's not separate entities, and trying to pull that together. I mean, that's the aspiration. And if we get that right, that will improve care. That's what happens all over the world. You get integrated care package, you get a better quality of care. It's better integrated with Guernsey. So hopefully we'll improve care on the island and with luck, save some money. But
yeah,
it's not the driver.
putting you back to the airport.
Go on.
There was this sort of promise from Alderney that if the scheme goes through, whereby you get the longer runway, etc., etc., that the States of Alderney would fund about £3 million. How are
Just
you
over
going to
3 million.
how are you going to find that money?
Well, actually, within the capital accounts, we do have that money, so we
Right.
could pay it, but that wouldn't necessarily be a good use of the money, because if we can get a soft loan from which is one of the ways from Guernsey, in terms of borrowing the money from Guernsey to do that, and we pay it back at a reasonable interest rates and so on over a period of time, over possibly the life even of the airport, then that may be a more efficient way to borrow that money. But we'll look at that, and we have all those options, so that, you know, but that also affects, as I said in the journal article this week, how much capital we've got for all the projects we would love to do on the island. I mean, you know, we all know about the swimming pool, and we're working on a swimming pool, looking at options, what we can do. We're looking at the sports hall. You know, the members are really working hard to bring the island plan to life, but we haven't got all the money to do everything. So we're going to have to prioritise some of this stuff. And the hierarchy of needs that I mentioned at the beginning 6 months ago, where, you know, we get the care, education, transport right first, then we go to housing, and we get housing and I can't remember the last one, but anyway, but yeah, those bottom three are so vital to keeping the economy of this island going and making sure people want to live here.
I mean, I think GST is unavoidable. You know, I think it's got to happen. It happens in Jersey. John Young reports that you know, people just accept it now. You know, you just sort of get this inflationary hump for a year. And John said they put it on the lot, everything.
Yeah. Well, when Guernsey had the debate, they took it off a few things, and there's has to be clarity about which items you do put it on. So, but we can't preempt that discussion at the moment. And you said in your notes you sent me, I mean, Amazon are now charging Guernsey GST and accounting for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an option, isn't it? I mean, to be honest, wouldn't our High Street and Victoria Street benefit if we were sort of putting a tax on Amazon coming into this island? Because, you know, we could still save money perhaps, but the VAT we said 10% of that came to us instead of, you know.
Yeah.
That could actually help. But I'm not saying that's a great idea, and I'm not saying we're going to do it. But what I'm saying is that's what's happened in Jersey. You're right that they've accepted it. And it's happened all over the world. I mean, I was in Dubai beginning of this year on a short break, and there's a very rich country, got VAT, it's got GST.
And the great thing about it, of course, Nigel, is that you can adjust it from time to time without necessarily going through all the rigmarole of having to sort of put it through as debates, etc., etc. But John Young, you know, I'm sorry to keep harping on about John, but, you know, it's interesting to sort of compare Jersey with Guernsey in these matters. And John was absolutely fine with it in terms of the fact that, you know, people over there accepted it.
Yeah, I think once it's in and we've got used to it, people will accept it. But no one wants to pay more tax. I mean, that's the reality of life. No one wants to pay more tax. But we've got to find ways to fund all the public services that people want. We've got to fund education. We've got to fund care, etc., etc. And, you know, the way we do it is taxation, and we have to look at all the various forms of taxation. It will come.
What I couldn't understand with Guernsey was that they were going to make concessions on income tax allowances and also social security. And I couldn't see how much you'd have to take before you hit the tipping point of actually getting positive GST into the system, because you're giving up revenue streams on tax and social security.
They had done the calculations and they're in the paper. And I mean, I can't off the top of my head tell you where the barriers were, but they, in the very detailed papers that most people didn't read, which is a pack about, you know, that thick of papers, they did actually do that. I mean, it was a very sensible package and it was good for our island. But what they tried to do was say, to try and, as you said, there's an inflationary hump of GST. They tried to make sure that the less well off in our society were not going to be penalised by bringing GST in straight away. So that's the balance they were trying to strike.
One thing I wanted to know is, if it comes about, will we get a share of it directly?
No. I mean, the idea is it'll go into the Guernsey coffers, and that will allow Guernsey to obviously fund various projects for the bailiwick as well as itself. What I think one of the benefits that we were talking to Guernsey about was, obviously there's a huge infrastructure that's going to have to be there to support GST, and again the budgets were all in the papers. One of the options is, why isn't some of that up in Alderney?
Yeah.
So we could get jobs here and people here and so on. That's certainly one of the things we'd be pushing for initially, I think, is to see if we could get that. But,
well, that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the resources, we've got the people, we've got space, we could do it.
And we're cheaper.
Yeah.
Effectively, aren't we?
Effectively, we're cheaper,
yeah. So that's an interesting thing to look out for. Can we move on to the Economic Activity Committee?
Economic Development Committee.
Development Committee, sorry.
Yeah.
I sit here duly chastised. I made the point that really you can't do it much on that until you've got the connectivity sorted out in terms of the airline and in terms of better broadband.
Well, I mean, there's lots of issues in terms of the strategy. We go back to what I said: if you want families to move here, you've got to give them the basic care, education, transport, housing, and energy was the other one that was missing of those. You've got to get those right, so that people feel they want to live here. I think the Economic Development Committee, if I look at it from a long-term perspective, and when the runway's built and we've got things, it's the time now is to start planning what we could do with 30,000 extra seats, how we're going to, you know, what we could do in terms of employment, what opportunities does that create? You know, we just talked about a back office for GST. If we did it, that would have to have really good links with Guernsey in terms of not only broadband and everything else, but obviously getting people backwards and forwards to Guernsey. And so I think those things are, you know, something we've got to work at. And it's no good doing it when the runway's built and the plane's there and then saying, oh, we'll set up the Economic Development Committee to look at how we do it. That's too late.
That's how they do it in the UK.
It's not how we do it in Alderney. We think ahead and we're planning ahead. And that's the idea of that group, really. You know, we want to get the basics right now. We want to make sure we're open for business. We're seen to be open for business. That, you know, we've got the right infrastructure now for businesses to set up here. People feel encouraged to come here. But let's be realistic. You know, young families staying here once the children get to secondary school age is a difficult ask.
Yeah. Part of the problem, of course, Nigel, is that it's very difficult as a small business to open a bank account these days. How do we get around that one?
It is difficult, but there are banks that do open accounts and there are people who will provide facilities here. I think it's a big issue, and I think it's something that we're going to have to sort out. I'm hopeful, for example, one of the benefits of passing and getting a good clearing on money val will that the banks will feel more comfortable about opening accounts here. So the head office in London or wherever feels that this is a safe place to do business, and therefore it isn't a money laundering centre, and the money val gives them a comfort to allow them to open bank accounts. So one of the benefits could be that.
So that's an interesting thing to look out for, isn't it, from that point of view?
Yeah. Yeah,
Having taken on the IMC and the ambulance, how much of a dent does that put in the finances of the States of Alderney?
Well, we've told you it's about 800,000, 600,000 to 800,000.
Yeah.
It's huge, and that's why we've looked at the care package and put a strategy together to have an integrated approach with the ambulance, the hospital, the care home, IMC, even looking at the pharmacy being part of that integrated approach, so that everything's working together in a more coherent, better service that we can offer to people. But that's a big dent,
But I would put that sort of thing into the social security category. So can you not get some money back from Guernsey on it?
Well, we get transfer services anyway from Guernsey in some of it, and we are working. The care board and Guernsey have been fantastic in working with us, helping us sort out the IMC and the issues there. I think that's very well publicised. Guernsey are fully on board with our strategy in terms of the integrated approach because they can see how it links with them. They've signed off on it. I did write in the journal about what's happening and where that's going, and it's got to evolve. But we get a lot of support from Guernsey already in that space.
Yeah. Okay. Can we come on now to this business about the UK government and the Alderney Holocaust, as reported in the Mail and the Guardian,
and the Times, and
and I think it's gone around the block now in terms of what's happening there. How I just can't understand how the UK can walk into a crown dependency and start calling the shots on something like this.
Well, it's not. The review isn't actually going to be conducted here. This is about the Holocaust, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, actually trying to clarify what really happened here in terms of deaths, etc. And it was a committee that's set up by Lord Pickles with a view to trying to get clarity, because there are as many people as there are numbers that are a bit banded around. We have had no say in it. It was disappointing, as I've said in the States, that we weren't even told about its launch beforehand. We had a conversation where Lord Pickles said he was thinking about something like this, but that was as much as we had. And the next thing we know, it's been announced. It isn't, but it does give everybody on the island the opportunity to put their input in, get some clarity on this, and perhaps stop the debate in the long term. So that could be a good thing.
I hear, though, that there was various files that were passed to Alderney some years ago. Has anyone actually looked at them?
Yes, they've all been looked at, and they will be all part of the review. So,
did it reveal anything that justifies the review?
The review is to clarify the position of how many people died on this island, or where did they die? I mean, and what happened to them. That's the review. And the papers, there's conflicting advice. Some things say different things. And this panel of international experts will look at all the evidence they can. They've asked for, and Lord Pickles announced yesterday, how people could contribute to the review and why, when, and all that sort of thing. So the more information anybody on the island has to give to it, the better it is. But it is not anything Guernsey's government, our government are involved with. It is purely a UK government inquiry into what happened here.
And they have the right. And they have the right to do that.
As any country could do it. I mean, whether they don't have to come here to do it.
Okay, we'll leave that one, I think, for the time being. Energy implementation. The energy report has come out, I believe. How do you see that in terms of implementation, bearing in mind the cost?
Yeah, I mean, cost is going to be an issue, and we need to go back to our capital budgets and what was justifiable in terms of borrowing, what we can afford, what we can't afford. But we need to move to a cleaner energy source, and with solar panels, wind turbines. I'm entirely a farm wind turbine.
Yeah.
Will provide the energy the island needs going forward. We cannot continue to rely on diesel going forward. It needs to happen. And I know that having done all the review and the initial work, and James Lancaster has done a fantastic job in getting the power station to a point where it can take on board these renewable sources. So we're in a pretty good shape. His job now is to get it off the ground and start it. And I understand he's looking at the solar energy first, and then the wind turbine will come after. But already work's being done. They're collecting data as to where the wind time should we go, and that information is being gathered. So it's all part of what's going on at the moment.
And you've got to sell it to the island, haven't you? Something like this, particularly the windmill, because it's a big old thing. And in the past, when people have suggested anything that's slightly different, they've been rejected. I remember the incinerator business from, 10, 15 years ago, where that all went wrong. Didn't quite go up in smoke.
All these things have to go to the public inquiry. All these things have to have people's votes. There's lots of hoops to go through yet, but we're not ready to. We haven't got the plans to bring forward to say to people, right, this is what we're actually going to do. We're in the planning phase, but the island will have to make some decisions. And as I say, we can't rely on diesel for the rest of our lives, so we're going to have to start looking at renewable energy. Tidal is a long way off. I mean,
yes, that's right. It's never mentioned.
No,
in terms of international engineering.
No, it's not. But wind farms, wind energy is far more developed. Solar energy is far more developed. Yeah, so that's where we've got to look, I think.
How about the housing policy now? I know the plans for the old Connaught, Whitegates. People are talking about self-build. I can't see how that can work, Nigel, because the cost of a self-build would be horrendous, wouldn't it?
Well, it depends on how you fund it and whether the states could help with some of the funding. That's one of the options being looked at. Look, I think when I took on this role, I think we discussed before, Whitegates, the old Connaught, these have been around, these white elephants, for a long time. And what you've got is an enthusiasm amongst the states to try and find a solution. They haven't come up with a solution yet, but all these things are being looked at with a view to saying, what could we do? What can we do? I mean, the old Connaught could be part of our care package where we could actually have essential workers based there.
Yeah,
one of the looking at.
That's the easy one.
That's the easy one. If we do that, Whitegates is a more difficult one, and you heard Kevin Gentle talk about it in the States meeting on Wednesday. There are options. It might be that the social housing is there. It might be that social housing is somewhere else, and we use that land to pay for social housing somewhere else. But these are options we really are keen to develop. I mean, I had a meeting with Alderney Housing Association recently at PNF, and we talked about how we've got to work together to improve the housing stock on the island.
Yeah.
And that is a really big conundrum, because they've got, obviously, they look at a house and they go, can we afford it? But actually, it might be if we can work together, we can actually get to a point where that housing stock could be reintroduced and be habitable in a much better way. And we need to look at that in a slightly different way than we've been looking at it. It's more in a partnership with the AHA than it is. There's AHA, there's the states of Alderney, and never the twain shall meet. We've got to work together to get the housing stock back. And so those sort of things that we are doing. Very constructive conversations. People are working on it. I know people would love to have answers yesterday, but these things do take time.
Trouble is, of course, there doesn't appear to be any property in the private sector to rent.
Well, there is a lot of property in the private sector to rent, but it's all rented.
Yes, that's what I mean. No free stuff at the moment.
But very little. You constantly see on Facebook and other places people asking rented accommodation.
Yeah.
We are short of rented accommodation on the island, without a doubt.
Any news on the marina?
The marina, no. We have commissioned a Bray development area review. Lynn Morris talked about that in the States.
Yeah.
That review is being done with a view to looking at the whole of the Bray Harbour area, the whole of Bray area. Because, we talk about the commercial quay, we talk about boats coming in, etc., the use of the beaches, the whole of that area needs to be reviewed, because what's going to make it future proof for the future in terms of what we actually need as an island.
Yeah.
And if as part of that review someone said there could be a marina, then that's a different situation. But the review does first. The marina is just a small component, of part of looking at the whole area as to what we should be doing going forward in the future.
I mean, it should be a money maker, shouldn't it?
A marina would be, in my opinion, transformational for this island. It would be a huge economic enabler. I mean,
yeah.
if we were able to set up a marina here with all the auxiliary services and so on that go with a marina to support the boats and so on, I think we could become a destination that people would want to go to get their boats fixed and mended and repaired, etc., etc. Because I can tell you, it's really difficult to get into Guernsey. They haven't got enough resources or space for all the boats they've got. So it's really difficult to get anything done down there. And we could have it on our doorstep. We could have it here to be a huge enabler, lots of jobs created, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But that's my view. We're a long way off from being able to do that.
Okay. Finally, road resurfacing.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're going to say, oh, it'd be done when the runway's done, but as you know, every litre of petrol that we purchase has a component which replaced the road fund licence.
Yes.
Where's all that money gone? And why isn't it on the road?
Because it never is that simple, is it, in terms of where the money goes. And the fuel duty goes into the pot. It's part of the money we've got, and we're allocating our resources accordingly, and it pays for states works and all the other things that we pay for out of our budget every year. So it's not like that money goes there, it must go there. It just goes into the pot, and then we have to allocate the resources accordingly. Yes, COVID, the runway has delayed resurfacing of the roads. We know that, and we were hopeful that we could make some progress on that. At the moment, we haven't made that progress.
Okay, so the potholes will continue to be around for a while.
The potholes are being filled up, but they're not being repaired properly at the moment. We know that.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, when the runway is built, then those things will happen.
Have that classic example where the man will arrive with his lorry and say, we've got a bit of tarmac left over from the previous job. Would you like us to do your roads?
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Nigel, thanks ever so for all your time. Really enjoyed talking to you as ever, and wish you every success.
Thank you very much, Tony.
All the very best.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.